Up next, we have Lucy Kearney, or Kearney, sorry, maybe I pronounced it wrong. Lucy is familiar with Queen's as well. She's a graduate, works in KMPG as a data scientist, and she is going to be talking about Git, started with Git, so a little bit into Git and GitHub. So welcome, Lucy. Thank you. Sorry.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here today. I hope you're all having a good day so far. I'd like to thank Women Techmakers for having me here. It's a great opportunity for me as a first-time speaker, and yeah, I really like their whole campaign this year, Dare to Be. So, yes, I'm Lucy, and I've been working at KPMG for almost 2 years now. You might have heard from my colleague earlier in the day, Angelica, talking about data ethics. So currently I'm working in data on a data science project, but I've worked in other areas of data analytics like data engineering, data visualization, and business intelligence. One thing that's been key with most of my projects is using Git. Because I'm working with code all the time, it's really important to manage your code and be able to use something that will enable you to collaborate with others. So that's why I chose to speak about Git today, and I hope by the end of the talk you have an understanding of Git and also the knowledge of how you can get involved yourself. This is what my agenda looks like for today. So I'm going to first of all talk about what Git actually is. I'm going to move on to why Git is useful, how it works. I'm also going to touch on my personal experience with Git throughout my time at KPMG. I'm going to touch on what GitHub is, and finally how you can get involved. So first and foremost, what is Git? Git is a version control system, and this means that Git will save versions of your code at certain points in time. So it's like taking snapshots of your code. And it's really important that you do this whenever you're developing code to help you track your changes over time. And it's really useful because you can see the history of all the changes. Why? Because whenever you make a change, you tell Git why you made that change. So you get an overview of the changes that were made, why you were making those changes, and also who was contributing to the project. This is the creator of Git, Linus Torvalds. He's a Finnish software engineer. He also created Linux as well. This is a real quote from him. You can see he has a bit of a sense of humor. So one of the key features about Git is that it is distributed. But before I throw that term out to you, let me talk about what a repository is first. So it's also known as a repo, and it's a location where all your source code or your project files are stored. So there can be two common types of version control systems. The first is centralized. This is kind of an older version control system where you have your repository on a server somewhere, and for developers to work on that code, they get a working copy. However, with distributed, developers have the full repository on their computer, which means that they also have this like full history of changes. So it has more advantages than centralized. So with centralized, there is a single point of failure because you have this central repo on the server, and it's bad if like everything crashes and then the developers can't work on the code. Whereas with distributed, because I have that full repository, if that repository on the server breaks, and they can still keep working on the code. So essentially with distributed, you have these like multiple backups of your repo. So why is Git useful? And one of the main things is distributed for the reasons I was talking about in the last slide. It's also open source, which Steph mentioned in our last talk, so anybody can contribute to the code, and the code is publicly available. Also with this full history of changes, so I mentioned before that you can see all the changes that you made before, but what's really good about this is that if you have a bug in your current code, you can just revert back to an earlier version where there wasn't a bug and everything's fixed, it's fine. And then once you've sorted that, you can then compare and contrast the versions to see what exactly went wrong. Also with Git, there's this element of peer review, which is really good when you're working with other people on a project. I'll explain about this a bit better in the next slide, but essentially people can come in, look at your code, give you comments, give you feedback, and make it even better. Okay, so how does Git actually work? So if you think about me, and I'm a developer or data scientist, whatever, and I have got given a task, and my task is to add a new feature to the code. All of the code, all of the source code should sit in the main branch, and this is where code is being fully tested and it works and there's no bugs. In order for me to start working on my feature, I branch off from the main one and I create my own feature branch. So this is like a safe environment where I can develop out the code and I won't break anything in the main source code. Then I start making my changes. Once I'm happy then that I think my new feature is done, I have to then request my code changes to be put into the main branch. This is then where the peer review comes in, which I was talking about in the last slide. So somebody has to come in, check your code, check everything's working okay, maybe give you feedback. Then once they approve it, my code is in the main branch and my feature is being added. So I've said that I've worked across a few different areas of data analytics, and one of my first projects was a data engineering project where I was scraping data. So I was getting data from websites and then saving them as CSVs, and these were like publicly available data sets from websites like the Office of National Statistics. And sorry, that was using Python to develop the scripts to scrape the data. My other project then using Git was developing a new dashboard for a client. So that's usually what I'm doing in my line of work. I'm working with clients to apply my expertise to something they need developed. And one of these was a dashboard. So they wanted to see analysis of their underlying data, like how well their employees do at selling products to customers. During this project, we did actually pass a bug into the main branch, but it was all okay because the dashboard wasn't live. But it was just a lesson to be learned about how that bug got there. Then finally, I'm using Git to help develop a machine learning model on time series data, and this model will forecast future events. So hopefully by now you know that Git is a version control system, and you can also think of it as something that you install on your computer. You may have heard of GitHub. So GitHub is an online platform where you host Git repositories, and it's really good for collaborating, and also like the clue is in the name, hub, like it's a community of developers all working together, and they even help pitch in to help each other out on their projects. That is a picture of my account, and I'm wearing the same vest right now, but I promise I do have other clothes. So yeah, it's really good if you want to build out your portfolio. It's really popular in public, so people, if you're thinking about like future employees, like they can just go into your GitHub and see what work you've been doing. So developers or data scientists will actually put a link to their GitHub in their CV, so recruiters can go in and see what's going on. Okay, so hopefully if I've done my job right, you're thinking, how can I get involved? There are loads of tutorials out there because Git is so popular. If you're like me though, and you don't like sitting through long videos, I would recommend doing First Contributions, which is a repo on GitHub. And attached to this repo, you get like a step-by-step guide of how you can use Git commands. And yeah, it's just really good hands-on experience if you just want to hit the ground running. Maybe you're not a complete newbie at Git, but that's okay because you can still get involved in real-life issues that are out there on GitHub. And an issue is something that, not necessarily wrong with the project, but even something like documentation, like Steph was talking about. It's really important that documentation is clear and up to date, so you can even get involved in updating documentation on open source projects. So if you're looking for beginner issues, look out for the label like this one. So you can see the label. It says good first issue. It's in purple there to the right. And yeah, that's an example of a good first issue. This was raised on the popular Python package called scikit-learn. And it's popular for data scientists. And somebody raised an issue that perhaps an error message could be better understood by just rewriting it a bit. And somebody who was a beginner on GitHub took up this issue, and their code is actually in the scikit-learn package for Python. Thank you so much for listening. There's a link to my LinkedIn. And happy to take any questions after the session, just conscious about time. So, yeah, thank you.